Samto was not like the other children in his school in Onitsha. While the others shouted, played, and laughed loudly in the classrooms and playground, he often stayed in a corner, sketching strange machines on scraps of paper. His teachers thought he was too quiet, and his classmates saw him as someone they could laugh at. Every day when he walked into class with his worn-out shoes and old school bag, whispers and giggles followed him. Some boys would nudge each other and call him the mute, because he rarely spoke unless asked a question. Samto wasn't mute, he just loved silence, and his mind was always busy with ideas no one else understood. But children rarely admire what they don't understand. To them, Samto was the odd one, the strange boy who smiled at broken radios in the junkyard, and who preferred sketching wires instead of playing football. At home, his mother told him, "My son, don't let their laughter steal your gift." But at school, he carried the weight of loneliness every day. Yet deep inside, there was a quiet fire, a little dream Samto refused to let go of. One day, the same voices that mocked him would clap for him. "Do you want me to continue writing part 2? A mother's silent pain, 200 words? In the same style?" Ngozi was a woman who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, but still walked with dignity. Every morning before the sun rose, she tied her bright headscarf, lifted her basket of vegetables, and went to the market in Onitsha to earn a little money for food and her son's school fees. Life was never easy. The rent was always waiting, the school bills kept coming, and sometimes there wasn't enough to cook for the night. Yet she never allowed her struggles to stop her from smiling at Samto, her only child. But deep down she carried a pain no one else could see. Almost every week, she was called to the school. Teachers would shake their heads and tell her, "Madam, your son is strange. He doesn't play like the other children. He draws machines all the time like someone lost in another world." And sometimes other parents would laugh behind her back, whispering that her boy was useless. Each word cut her heart, but she stayed quiet, nodding respectfully before leaving. At night, when Samto was asleep, Ngozi often sat by the small kerosene lamp in their one-room house, wiping silent tears from her face. She wondered if her son would ever be accepted, if the world would ever see the gentle genius she saw in him. She prayed quietly, whispering into the darkness, "God, let the same people who laugh at him today one day clap for him. Let my son's gift shine." And when Samto would wake up in the middle of the night, asking why she was still awake, she would quickly smile and say, "Nothing, my child. I'm just thinking." She never let him see her pain, because she wanted him to carry hope, not worry. Her heart bled in silence, but her faith in her son was louder than every voice that mocked him. Do you want me to continue with part 3, The Classroom of Mockery, 350 words, in the same simple emotional style? In Samto's classroom, laughter was often louder than learning, especially when it was directed at him. Every time he walked in, heads turned toward his old shoes that had been patched more than once. Some boys would point and whisper loudly, "Look at Samto's shoes, they're crying more than him." The girls would giggle, covering their mouths, while others shook their heads, wondering why he always carried pieces of wire and broken batteries in his bag. During lessons, while the teacher explained, Samto's pencil often moved across his book in strange lines, drawing machines that looked like wings, wheels, and solar panels. Instead of admiring his creativity, his classmates would snatch his book and pass it around, laughing. "He's drawing toys that will never fly," one boy mocked. "Even kites fly better than whatever he is making." Their words stung, but Samto rarely replied. He just kept looking at his work, as if he was seeing something beyond their laughter. Even the teachers did not see him clearly. To them, he was simply a distracted child who needed to focus on real subjects. When the class laughed at him, some teachers only said, "Keep quiet," but none asked, "What is he building?" Samto sat there quietly, his heart heavy but his mind racing with dreams they could not understand. Sometimes during break, when others played football in the dust, Samto sat under a tree, fixing broken toys or connecting tiny wires. A few children gathered around him out of curiosity, but most laughed from a distance. He heard them whisper, "Samto is wasting his time. Nothing good will ever come out of his foolish drawings." Yet behind his silence was a quiet strength. Though he felt the sting of their mockery, he refused to stop. He would rather be mocked for creating something than be praised for following the crowd. Deep inside, he held on to a secret hope that one day the My did I do no we're for my herf such none. If you're retchnish do with no, yet no what that's in the beat doing it. Skeffer, minilom serves nish nevin is the hood. Stian yaps near ziflud with mas. Yet yap mit complor willow. Stian stiesel grim vasil for me. So, crack neural from the corpse that the more rudel at. What no one more fell no map up once in us now as in mistakes. Sent God knowing it nick with mas. Chene foil mail no. Fakes in it will be stay. Stakes now sees ne for finam vahended issuinish. Met pat servanish up the earth lifsery. Nashi gets nasser hingstau. Wheels sisted nestor nefa. He's wooden thumbs. More with vernoch than it. My asip mail in the third hour nerve nashin immersed. Where almost nege arshla. Flas most drips a wood mas. Bang if it redets knit up. Sissy silfella thinger it's smehingville. God knowing it full hot smashed the. Whoa, the way I'm smehing him. He'll give her flop and the wolf scrub smash mas. Flas mit rock they scaben the one is all harms is nemen skiff. Weet the man you know. Dale but the round birch. Like sings out but the girls nay he nasts it. Her dear it must him a keep way to live the soft but there see. Her sheriff so it was not sister. Gosh, till see you laugh but helpful is line owing it. Sheriff in the foot if base load up itself, Mr. Away there blow the word elk the world foot. And I ging arshnet. Evening it's setting it kind of sitting it kind of gale fresh growl sheet lunahi. Smears for Bashker Wookeld will get the odds with my snit up. My only sir say up a little bit somewhere with my hero feet wide arps the was a seat nets blob blow seared ab Nickor. Sir Alva sparks the world for not a geld sark as he. He'll have seeped belsner lusher that low. Falla make more rudels with mas. The end of this knitted if Sir Derst was nice in that they auch were gushed in of a steerch. One Monday morning during assembly, the principal made an announcement that made every student's eyes light up. A national science competition was coming up, and the school had been invited to send students to represent them. The winners would not only receive prizes, but also scholarships and recognition across the country. Excitement buzzed through the crowd as students whispered and dreamed about who would be chosen. Samto stood quietly in the line, his head slightly bowed, but inside his heart began to race. A science competition, that was his world. While others thought of robots they couldn't build and experiments they couldn't explain, Samto had already pictured what he could create with his scraps and sketches. That same day, when the forms were placed on the teacher's desk for those interested, Samto walked slowly to the front and wrote down his name. The class burst into laughter. Samto? Are you serious? One boy shouted. What will he bring? His broken toys from the trash. Another girl smirked. Maybe he will show us how to fix shoes with wires. Their laughter spread like wildfire across the room, and even the teacher, though she didn't laugh, looked at him with doubtful eyes. But Samto didn't flinch. He held his paper and sat back down, staring at his desk while the mocking words echoed around him. He had heard them all before. He had grown used to being the joke in the room. Yet this time was different. This was his chance to show them who he really was. That night, when he returned home, he told his mother about the competition. Her tired face lit up instantly. Though she had only a little money, she placed her hands on his shoulders and said softly, "My son, if this is your chance, you must take it. Don't mind their laughter. Let them laugh today, but tomorrow let them clap." Samto nodded, holding her words in his heart. He knew it would not be easy. He had no polished lab, no expensive tools. All he had were scraps, determination, and the prey. When Samto told his mother about the science competition, her face broke into a smile that carried both pride and pain. She had just returned from the market, her wrapper soaked with sweat, her hands rough from carrying heavy baskets. Life had been unkind, yet when she heard her son's quiet voice saying, "Mama, I want to enter the competition," something inside her heart leapt. She looked at him as though she could already see the future shining in his eyes. Gozi had almost nothing. The little she made from selling vegetables was already stretched thin between food, rent, and school fees. But as she sat down on their wooden stool and stared at her son's hopeful face, she made a decision that only a mother could. She untied the corner of her wrapper and brought out the small cloth where she kept her savings. It wasn't much, just a few wrinkled naira notes she had been keeping for emergencies. Handing it over, she whispered, her voice trembling, "Take it, Samto. Buy what you need. It may not be enough, but use it well. My son, your gift will make the world bow one day." Tears filled Samto's eyes as he held the money. He knew it was all she had, the result of countless days under the hot sun, calling out prices to customers who sometimes argued with her over the smallest coin. He felt the weight of her sacrifice and the depth of her belief in him. That night, while others slept, he spread the money out carefully, planning what to buy: wires, batteries, small tools. Nothing was wasted. As Ngozi watched him work under the dim lamp, she said nothing more, but her heart prayed endlessly. She prayed that her sacrifice would not be in vain, that her son's invention would silence the voices of those who mocked him, and that his brilliance would open doors she could never open for him. Her faith wrapped around him like a shield, and Santo felt stronger knowing that even if the whole world doubted him, one person, his mother, believed he was destined for greatness. Do you? Snedef macht auch the Pressure Sitteritsness Loschen Irsi. Alco with her almost headed Falmetal. Stirs her them sitter memory to Psaf Ibrasi. Oh, sitter for 0 best in a scaben the waddles itself be. I've nursed under the hip. My hitting in her Zia earth left foot must. Stare and Nikish skull of Watchnish Gazerstich must nevi. Sither fresh in number fear will not make it. Faller than why dear Nick or Brickel. Heel wild rips a will no. Scratch darps it as it. Smah, now he boogies niritsmas. He helps it nurse ya, other throw we set. My was nish never chill off, but going it uncle. Sear I but business real the rivax garden the woodery. Snay humps in it. Today I feel elster she. Floor or sushi. What must make it? And I would have been your soon as your skiff in your pants. And there's luster that be lark but snurry. Zero der balance led me by his gelkel at the I was nipskin. Stiang hilt the snishimot. Stab or we nash the blood frozel bit. Sir Zil Brits are way low, or Miss Man Sulks. Smell funny in its search. Sure that the hirschnach of the Volommer snoots. Her if snail sunshine at the zoo at all hot that's I larking as her name. Surgeon sap the caps is up. Near elps no. So and the val as a weedis. Fjall the har or funny when it behoet not smears the hell off so again and shift market van you know. When it was finally Santo's turn, the announcer's voice echoed through the microphone. Next, we have Santo from Onitsha. For a moment, the hall went silent, then whispers spread like wildfire. Heads turned, parents leaned toward each other, and laughter trickled through the rows. Everyone's eyes went straight to the small boy in the faded uniform carrying nothing but a rough wooden box with wires sticking out. Some parents shook their heads, their voices dripping with pity and mockery. Why did the school even bring this boy here? One mother murmured. He will disgrace them in front of the whole nation. A man chuckled loudly. Look at him trembling already. He should have stayed home. Even some of the students from other schools laughed openly, pointing at his project and whispering jokes. Santo's hand shook as he walked up the stage. His knees felt weak and his throat dry. For a second he almost wished he could run away. The weight of every mocking word he had heard all his life pressed down on him. But then he looked toward the back of the hall. His mother sat there, her eyes fixed on him, her lips moving in silent prayer. That sight gave him strength. He took a deep breath and placed his box on the table in front of the judges. The hall was restless with giggles and whispers, but Santo tried to shut it out. He remembered the nights he worked under the kerosene lamp, the scraps he had turned into treasure, and his mother's voice whispering, "Your gift will make the world bow one day." Though his body trembled, his spirit refused to break. He touched the wires with steady hands and prepared to show the world that the boy they mocked was more than their laughter. The hall may have expected a failure, but in that moment, Santo carried the quiet power of someone who knew destiny was on his side. Do you want me to continue with part 9, The Invention Unveiled, 350 words, in the same emotional and viral style? Santo placed the small wooden box on the table, his hands trembling but his heart steady. The hall was filled with whispers and laughter, but he ignored them. Slowly, he lifted the cover, revealing what he had built. A simple-looking device made from wood, glass, wires, and an old solar panel he had found in the junkyard. To most eyes, it still looked like scrap, But Samto's voice was clear as he began to explain. "This is a solar-powered water purifier," he said softly, his words carrying into the microphone. Some students snickered, but the judges leaned forward, curious. Samto picked up a jar of dirty water, thick with sand and brown in color. He poured it carefully into the device. For a moment the hall remained noisy with whispers, but then silence began to fall. Everyone watched as the sunlight hit the small solar panel, powering the system. Slowly, drop by drop, clear water began to flow out into another jar. The hall went quiet. The judges froze in astonishment, their eyes locked on the clean water now glistening under the stage lights. One judge picked up the jar, examining it closely, then tasted it. His eyes widened. "It's pure," he whispered, unable to hide his shock. Gasps echoed through the room. Students who had laughed minutes before now stared with their mouths open. Parents who had mocked him shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Teachers leaned forward, some covering their faces in shame for ever doubting him. Samto's invention was not just a toy. It was a miracle built from scraps. A solution that could change lives in villages where clean water was a daily struggle. As Samto continued his demonstration, showing how the device could be powered with nothing but sunlight, the entire hall sat frozen in disbelief. The boy they thought would be a disgrace was now proving to be a genius. Samto lifted his head, his eyes shining, not with pride but with relief. For the first time the world was finally seeing what he had always known. His gift was The moment the clear water dripped into the jar, the entire hall changed. Just minutes before, laughter had filled the room. Now silence pressed heavily in the air, broken only by the sound of clean drops hitting the glass. Then came the first gasp, then another, until the hall was filled with stunned voices. Cameras flashed like lightning, reporters rushed forward, and the judges stood up from their seats as if they couldn't believe what they had just seen. Parents who had shaken their heads earlier now leaned forward, their eyes wide. "This child is a genius," someone whispered loudly, and the words spread quickly across the hall like fire. Students who had laughed at Samto now looked at him with awe, their faces red with shame. The very teachers who ignored his drawings in class clapped their hands nervously, as if trying to cover their guilt. Samto stood on the stage, still trembling, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from the weight of the moment. He had turned their laughter into silence, their whispers into astonishment. And as the judges moved closer to inspect his creation, nodding with admiration, Samto felt something new rise inside him: courage. His mother, Ngozi, could not hold back her tears. She pressed her wrapper to her face, crying openly as she watched her son stand where no one believed he could. She had prayed for this moment, and now it was here. The same boy they mocked was the one the nation was now clapping for. The murmurs grew louder, turning into applause, then into cheers. People stood from their seats shouting, "Bravo! Genius! Incredible!" Reporters pointed cameras at Samto, capturing the face of the shy boy who had built a miracle from scraps. The hall that once mocked him now celebrated him. The very stage where many thought he would fail became the place where he rose above them all. And in that unforgettable moment, Samto's story began to spread beyond those walls. "Do you want me to continue with part 11 from La?" The applause started slowly, hesitant at first, like people testing if this was real. Then it grew louder, stronger, until the entire hall was clapping and cheering. Samto's small hands trembled as he stood on the stage, unsure where to look first. The same students who had mocked him just moments ago were frozen, their mouths open, eyes wide. Some whispered apologies to one another, while others hung their heads in shame, realizing how cruel their laughter had been. The teachers who had once ignored his sketches, dismissed his ideas, or warned him to focus on normal subjects now clapped the loudest. Some tried to smile modestly, but their eyes betrayed guilt. They had underestimated him for years. They had seen only a quiet boy with worn-out shoes, never the genius who had been quietly building a future in a small room in Onitsha. Even the parents who had doubted him now stood up, cheering, clapping, and some wiping away tears. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment for television and newspapers. The shy boy with the rough wooden box now the center of admiration. People shouted words of encouragement, clapping so hard their hands hurt, celebrating the victory of someone who had been overlooked and mocked for so long. Samto's classmates could only stare. The boy they had laughed at, called strange and ignored, had shown them something none of their fancy robots or polished gadgets could. Pride, determination, and a heart that refused to give up had carried him to this moment. Their laughter had turned to silence, and their silence had turned into awe. And in the middle of the applause, Samto's eyes found his mother, Ngozi, sitting at the back, her hands clasped together, tears rolling down her cheeks. She was beaming with pride, her prayers answered in the most beautiful way. The boy who had been mocked, the quiet child of Onitsha, had not only proved his worth, he had shown everyone that courage, faith, and hard work could turn ridicule into glory. Ngozi sat at the back of the hall, her bright traditional wrapper wrapped neatly around her, but no amount of color or beauty could hide the tears streaming down her face. She had spent years working under the sun, selling vegetables at the market, stretching every coin to feed and educate her only son. She had watched him be laughed at, ignored, and called strange, yet she had never stopped believing in him. Now, as the announcer called Samto's name and declared him the winner of the National Science Fair, her heart nearly burst with joy. She could hardly breathe. Her hands shook as she covered her face, sobs escaping uncontrollably. Around her, the hall seemed to pause, recognizing the depth of a mother's love. People turned to see her tears and, without a word, gave her respect. Some whispered, "She raised him well," while others nodded in admiration at the woman whose quiet faith had made this moment possible. As cameras flashed and reporters tried to capture the image of the boy genius, Ngozi felt the world fade around her. All she could see was her son on the stage, standing tall, proud, and shining like she had always imagined. Every sleepless night, every struggle, every worry she had carried alone, all of it led to this moment. She wanted to run to him, to hug him so tightly that the world would feel her love and pride. Her neighbors and other parents in the hall watched her quietly, understanding that her tears were not just for the prize, but for the recognition of her sacrifices, her belief, and her unwavering support. Ngozi had prayed for this day, and now the universe had answered. Through her tears she whispered softly, "My son, this is your time. My prayers, my faith, and your courage have brought you here. Shine, my child, shine." And as Samto looked toward the back, catching his mother's gaze, he felt a strength and love that no competition, no mockery, and no challenge could ever take away. Do you want me to continue with part 13 ASTA? The news of Samto's victory spread like wildfire, first across Lagos, then across Nigeria, and soon beyond the country's borders. Television channels interrupted their programs to broadcast footage of the shy boy from Onitsha, holding up his solar-powered water purifier. Reporters described how a child, laughed at by his classmates, had built a device that could save lives. Newspapers ran headlines celebrating his ingenuity, and social media was filled with clips of Samto's demonstration, people commenting in awe and admiration. Invitations began arriving from all corners of the world. International scientists, universities, and technology centers wanted him to present his work. Emails and letters poured in, offering scholarships, mentorship, and opportunities to develop his invention further. Samto, once the quiet boy hidden in the corner of his classroom, was now being called a genius on global platforms. Despite all the attention, Samto remained humble. He never forgot the small room in Onitsha where he had spent nights connecting wires and testing ideas under the flickering light of a kerosene lamp. Every interview, every photograph, and every award reminded him of the nights he worked silently, the encouragement of his mother, and the laughter he had endured. The people of Onitsha celebrated their son. Local schools, neighbors, and community leaders praised him, proud that someone from their town had achieved what many thought impossible. Children who once ignored him now looked up to him with admiration, and parents pointed to him as an example of what determination and hard work could achieve. Samto's story became more than a tale of science. It became a story of hope, courage, and resilience. The shy boy who was mocked, ignored, and doubted had become the pride of a nation. His name was spoken with respect, his invention discussed with awe, and his journey inspired countless others to believe in their gifts, no matter how small or overlooked they seemed. When Samto returned to school after the National Science Fair, the halls felt different. The whispers and laughter that had once followed him now turned into cautious glances and shy smiles. The very classmates who had teased him about his worn-out shoes, strange drawings, and broken gadgets now approached him slowly, unsure how to act. "Samto, can we sit with you?" one boy asked hesitantly. Another girl added, "We didn't believe in you before. We're sorry." For a moment, Samto remembered every laugh, every joke, every whispered insult. He could have shouted, told them off, or turned his back. But something stronger had grown in him than hurt or anger. It was the quiet strength of dignity, of knowing his worth. He smiled gently and said, "It's okay. What matters is that we learn from each other." His voice carried no pride, only kindness, and the hall seemed to pause as his classmates absorbed the lesson. Even the teachers noticed the change. They had once ignored him, dismissed his ideas, and allowed the mockery to continue unchecked. Now they looked at him differently, realizing that the boy they underestimated had taught them all a lesson in courage and humility. As days passed, students who once laughed began to watch Samto with respect. Some asked him to help with small projects, others listened closely when he spoke about science. He shared what he knew freely, never holding back, never letting bitterness guide him. Slowly, the mockers understood that true greatness isn't about proving others wrong. It's about rising above cruelty, staying humble, and letting your actions speak louder than words. Even the smallest gestures of friendship from his former tormentors felt like victory, not for revenge but for transformation. Samto's heart remained kind, his spirit unbroken. Through forgiveness he showed that dignity shines brighter than anger, and that a single act of perseverance can teach lessons far beyond the classroom walls. By the end of the term, Samto's story spread far beyond the walls of his school, and even beyond the streets of Onitsha. People told it again and again, how the quiet boy with worn-out shoes, laughed at by classmates and ignored by teachers, had built a life-changing invention from scraps. Parents shared his journey with their children, teachers spoke of it in classrooms, and soon, his story became more than just a tale. It became a lesson, a proverb everyone remembered. Never laugh at a child's gift, for the stone you mock may become the nation's crown. Every time someone spoke those words, they remembered the courage it took for a boy to believe in himself when no one else did. They remembered the mother who prayed and sacrificed, the nights spent in a tiny room under a flickering lamp, and the power of determination that could turn ridicule into glory. Samto became a symbol of hope for children who felt different, reminding them that being quiet or odd didn't mean being powerless. Even years later, people would still point to him as proof that talent can come from anywhere, and that kindness, patience, and faith could change the world. Samto's quiet genius had transformed him from the object of laughter into a beacon of inspiration. He had shown that the smallest hands, guided by persistence and love, could hold the power to shine brighter than wealth, privilege, or mockery. And in Onitsha, every child who dreamed differently felt a little braver, because one boy had dared to turn ridicule into glory. If you want, I can now combine all 15 parts into a complete, polished 4,000-word viral script with smooth transitions and emotional flow, ready to read or publish. Do you want me to do that next?